Welcome back to the London Futurists podcast. Our guest in this episode is David Wakeling, partner at A&O Shearman, which became the world's third largest law firm in May thanks to the merger of Allen and Overy, a UK Magic Circle firm, with Shearman and Sterling of New York. David heads up a team within the firm called the Markets Innovation Group, MIG, which consists of lawyers, developers and technologists, and is seeking to disrupt the legal industry. He also leads the firm's AI advisory practice, through which the firm is currently advising 80 of the largest global businesses on the safe deployment of AI. One of the initiatives David has led is the development and launch of Contract Matrix in partnership with Microsoft and Harvey, an OpenAI-backed GPT-4-based large language model that has been fine-tuned for the legal industry. Contract Matrix is a contract drafting and negotiation tool powered by generative AI. It was tested and honed by 1,000 of the firm's lawyers prior to launch to mitigate against risks like hallucinations. The firm estimates that the tool is saving up to 7 hours from the average contract review, which is around a 30% efficiency gain. As well as internal use by 2,000 of its lawyers, it's also licensed to clients. This is the third time we've looked at the legal industry on the podcast. While lawyers no longer use quill pens, they're not exactly famous for their information technology skills either. But the legal profession has a couple of characteristics which make it eminently suited to the development of advanced AI systems. It generates vast amounts of data and money, and lawyers frequently engage in text-based routine tasks which can be automated by generative AI systems. So David, welcome to the London Futurist podcast.
Thank you. It is fabulous to be here, and I'm looking forward to this chat.
Me too. Pleased to meet you, David.
Likewise.
So David, I mentioned in the introduction that although the legal industry is not usually found at the forefront of technological change, it does seem to be relatively advanced in its use of AI. Do you think that's true? And if so, why do you think it's happening?
Yes, I would agree with it. Sometimes generative AI feels a bit like a solution without a problem. But in the legal industry, there are characteristics that so obviously match this kind of solution. And they've been developing over centuries. So there's loads of law and regulation that needs to be mastered, a massive amount of data. Lawyers need to follow precedent. That's the whole point. To follow paths trodden before and keep an eye on market practice. And you don't always want your lawyer to be incredibly creative, only sometimes. It's a very expensive business to get highly educated, highly trained people to deliver legal advice. So in the case of law, the solution, the LLM solution, really fits this problem well, because LLMs excel at huge data sets of complex language-based information. And there's so much in the public domain already because you're supposed to know what laws apply to you. You've got a quick access point, and then you can build on it with market practice and so on. It's those characteristics that make the legal industry consistently referenced as one of the top industry sectors that are going to be disrupted by AI. And for us, we saw this a few years ago, and we really put our money where our mouth is. We jumped on generative AI and wanted to be and became the first to deploy Gen AI via Harvey across our business back in December 22. And that was around the time ChatGPT was just being released. And now we've got 4,000 of our staff across 43 jurisdictions really bought into this. It's a big investment, and we kept it going. Then, middle of last year, you mentioned Contract Matrix. That was a deal we did with Microsoft and Harvey to really build our own system that leverages generative AI and allows it to expand across deal makers within the firm. We are the biggest transactional law firm in the world. We do the most deals. So Contract Matrix is really servicing those users using Gen AI. That was how we rolled it out to several thousand lawyers as well, as you described so well in your opening. We've also licensed it to clients. We're seeing it as not just a brilliant productivity gain, we're seeing it as an interesting new source of revenue. Some clients like ASML, biggest tech company in Europe, they are users and have been very public about how it's boosted the legal function so successfully. In summary, law is at the forefront of this, shockingly, I know, for people outside the legal industry, but there are so many good reasons for it and so many possibilities.
Just to clear up one possible point of confusion, the word generative in generative AI usually implies that it's making things up. It's creating images that have never existed before. It's creating text that's never existed before. Now, there have been reports of generative AIs generating legal cases that didn't exist. And the lawyers took them to court and said, here's a case that bolsters our point. And it was wrong. So how important is the generative in the solutions you're creating?
In fact, the very reason we built Contract Matrix is because at the very beginning, our risk functions, all of our in-house legal, my group, we obsessed about the dangers of it. And we were worried, frankly, about lazy lawyer risk. We were worried in 2 years' time, when we've done all the education training, we've exhausted ourselves warning the people on hallucination risk, where would the danger be? Would lawyers cite incorrect cases and so on? Where that took us is into two things. The first thing is we did a huge amount of work in terms of defining acceptable use cases and the governance around them, to the point where operationally you can't use systems for certain use cases. It just won't let you do random legal research. It has to be channeled over curated data sets. And the second thing is we built Contract Matrix. I mean, that's the exact reason we built Contract Matrix, is to make sure we weren't exposed to generic, publicly trained AI models, which were very prone to hallucination. But instead, we at the very least were doing RAG, retrieval augmented generations, on specific use cases. We're pointing the AI model at curated data sets to reduce the risk of errors. But also, we did our own fine tuning with Harvey. So collectively, there's a lot has gone into that risk, and we see it as a big deal. And that's why we always have an expert in the loop. We always have a lawyer who's making the final judgment call, as well as all those things I just mentioned, the governance, the operational requirements, and the configuration.
It's very interesting that you're able to make this claim that there's a 30% efficiency gain. It's nearly 2 years now since ChatGPT was launched, which was GPT 3.5, and it's about a year and a half since GPT 4 was launched. And particularly when GPT 4 was launched, a lot of people thought, wow, this is an incredibly powerful tool and should raise productivity right across the economy. And it really hasn't happened, partly because a lot of big companies have been very hesitant about using it because of the hallucination problem, but also about the concern of data leaking back into the model and jeopardizing privacy requirements. So there's not been that many people saying we've made X and Y gains. And your statement of a 30% efficiency gain is quite striking and very interesting. Have you been able to translate that into money? Can you say this tool has helped us and our clients save X amounts of money?
Yes, I can do it in a few ways. 30% became conservative when we asked clients for their feedback. So we've licensed Contract Matrix to clients, and our internal number estimate of 30% is lower than our client's number, which is, depending on a specific use, somewhere between 40 and 60% on their numbers. How much time is it saving on summarizing? How much time is it saving on redrafting? We've got some client feedback, which is very specific as to the sorts of things lawyers do, and it's higher. In terms of money savings, where we license it to clients, you can hear it. They're in-house lawyers using it directly, and they're freeing time in their legal function to do other things. When it comes to our own services directly, we're doing some interesting things today, which are all about saving money. For example, there's a new regulation of banks coming out in Europe. Digital operational resilience is the flavor of this regulation. And these banks have to look at all of their vendors and check that they have resilient arrangements in place. We are providing an AI service using Contract Matrix, which is fixed fee, and it's a lot cheaper than we could have done a couple of years ago. It would be several £100,000 cheaper for each one of these engagements. They're quite big projects. So it's very meaningful, very obvious to clients, both in terms of commissioning us to do things where AI can be deployed, and also when they're licensing software as a service via Contract Matrix. You see it in both ends.
So you can see pools of money being saved. You add up the hundreds of thousands and pretty soon you're talking real money.
Yeah.
Have you made an estimate of the total saving that Content Matrix has made in your firm and in your clients together?
Yes, we are keeping it confidential, but it is meaningful for the firm.
Can I push you to say whether it's tens of millions or hundreds of millions for your firm and for your clients? I don't want to sort of get into your commercial details.
Well, we are operating in a very competitive environment. We are the best at this, we think, across all law firms. It is important to us. It's become a strategic priority. It wouldn't have become a strategic priority for the global firm if it wasn't meaningful. And I'm going to stop there.
Okay, fair enough.
And how can you anticipate maintaining that competitive edge? You've got an advantage just now, you believe, but aren't there lots of people who are doing or trying to do similar things?
I think there are some barriers to entry. So I run a very unusual group in a law firm. It might be unique globally, and it's called the Markets Innovation Group. And it's made up of lawyers, developers, data scientists, technologists who may be from none of those backgrounds. And we're not doing this as a hobby. It's sort of like I'm doing conventional A&O Shearman transactional work in the morning, and then I spend a couple hours before I go home doing some AI stuff. This is all we do as a group. And we've acquired a lot of expertise on how to roll out these systems. We understand what prompt engineering really looks like, and we know how to scale it across the operation. We've made suggestions to how we change the hiring of new lawyers, the next generation coming up, to make sure they've got the right aptitude for a technology augmented future for the legal sector. We are achieving very good strategic partnerships with people like Microsoft and obviously Harvey and indirectly OpenAI through that and so on. This is like any business environment. These are hard things to do. There's sort of institutional knowledge, expertise, and relationships to right people. Plus, we have every bit of past experience, like prompt engineering, we're building internal intellectual property on. So I agree, everyone will be doing this, but we intend to keep moving fast, take it really seriously, not just as a hobby, and make sure we have the right blend of skill sets in our teams. This isn't just lawyers. This is lawyers and other skill sets like developers and data scientists.
As well as the big law firms who are doing this, yourselves and your peers, and I take your point that you want to remain ahead of the pack, there's also industry vendors, firms like LexisNexis and Westlaw, who come from a publishing background and they control very large amounts of data about past legal cases. And then there's technology startups like Engine B, who work with professional services firms in the law and the accounting industries. How do you think this landscape will sort itself out? One pattern which I think we're starting to see in the accounting industry is that big firms are flying solo with the help of the big tech firms, and the mid-tier firms are relying more on industry vendors like Engine B. Is it likely to work out like that in the law industry, or will it be something different?
I think that's likely. It is much better for a very big law firm to leverage its own intellectual property internally and doing these strategic partnerships with really big tech companies rather than have a kind of proliferation of smaller vendors and always starting with generally trained public information, which can sometimes be more mediocre. But it is a scale business. It's economies of scale business, a lot of investment to get this stuff away. For us, we did it with the whole project plan around this, starting with let's strike a deal with Microsoft and Harvey to build out Contract Matrix. Let's create this training environment and so on. It's a lot of work. What is perhaps different, I don't know the big four industry sector well enough, but maybe it's different, is that we are getting approached by a lot of law firms who are smaller to talk about licensing Contract Matrix, and we are open to that. And I don't know if that translates in the same way, but we don't see a reason not to do that. The more investment, the more usage our systems get, the easier it will be to stay ahead and for them to be cutting edge. We are open to that possibility. That might be different to the other sector you named.
Maybe I can press you on some of your secret sauce, David, on how you roll out innovative systems.
Yeah.
Because it's often the case that a system that works well in a pilot when it's actually brought into the real workforce, it causes a dip in productivity before the productivity goes up. Because people are confused with the combination of the old methods and the new methods. Sometimes it's called the innovation J curve, with the downward slope before the upward slope.
Yeah.
And many companies give up in the process to say, oh, this AI stuff's been overhyped, I'm not going to stick with it. So can you share how you help companies to adapt to the potentially disruptive methods you're bringing in?
Well, we have done it in two areas. One is we formed something called AI Steerco a couple of years ago, which was senior management, and it was about getting them to champion it and understand what it is. And a lot of time was spent in education at that level. We even upskilled a couple of senior management folk with some more formal AI training to make sure the people in that conversation knew and were familiar with this technology. Because familiarity is one of the big barriers. So we had a kind of leadership position, which is very pro AI. But we then created several other changes to our organizational governance. So one of them is we created something, it's a weird name, but we call something called AI Brains Trust. So it's got about 70 people on it. It's really a lot of people, but there are people all over the network. We have thousands of lawyers in over 40 jurisdictions around the world. Some of them are going to be technologists. Some of them love this stuff. They are early adopters. And we've brought them together in a forum so that they can give us feedback on the tech, and then they can champion it in their particular practice areas or their jurisdictions. And they're mainly certain age group, lawyers all over the world who've loved technology as a kind of hobby for the last 10 years kind of thing. They've just been so excited that AI has finally arrived. So we're kind of co-opting people. In terms of the systems themselves, we will not release anything unless it's got like 3 buttons, and even someone who hates technology can't master it in 30 seconds. We're aware of the barrier. If something is too complex, it takes too much effort to start using straight away. We also have a feedback loop. We have data-driven feedback. What is usage? Are they coming back? We also have direct feedback, as in tell me what you think, give it star ratings, how would you make it better? It is surprising how good the engagement is actually on that. Most people don't reply on IT surveys, but when we say, how do you improve this product and our AI rollouts, we're getting the engagement. They are expressing views, good and bad. They're expressing all the views. And we're taking that on board and showing them that we're responding to it, and quickly. So we say, okay, we have introduced a new feature which deals with X, and then people feel they're part of this, and that makes a difference as well. So yeah, we're aware of it and have taken measures from the beginning, really, back in 22. If you think at the time we first rolled out AI, it was quite a scary thing. Just around the time ChatGPT was emerging in the public consciousness, it's a scary thing back then, and incredibly exciting and disruptive. So we really invested a lot of time in the communication, the engagement.
That's a very interesting and thorough set of ways of dealing with some of the standard problems. One of the standard problems that companies have in this area is that data science isn't part of the traditional skill set of lawyers. And when professional services buy in external expertise, they sometimes have a hard time respecting it and getting benefit from it. We've seen this for decades with marketing expertise in all kinds of professional services firms. And in the case of the accounting firms, where I've seen it upfront and personal, with strategy consulting expertise, every now and then the accounting firms buy a strategy consultancy and then they proceed to kill it. Lawyers and accountants are justifiably proud of the skills that they've worked for years to acquire, and it's tempting for them to look down on people who haven't done the same thing. It sounds like you're getting over this problem, and you're going to tell us that this effect isn't happening with AI experts and data scientists within your firm.
Callum, I'm glad you raised this. This definitely has been a thing in the legal industry. And yes, there is a risk that the legal industry, the lawyers, will be a little bit snobby, look down on the people from different skill sets, exactly as you just described. The way we've approached this, I am going to say we haven't done that. And that's by design. We know that that is the traditional legal industry. We know that is a failure in collaboration. We know that that is not going to lead to any good outcomes. And so we went the other way. We did the polar opposite. The group I run is called the Markets Innovation Group, MIG. That runs AI development deployment within the firm, and it is made up of all these different skill sets, developers, data scientists, lawyers. And it's a real team meetings, training days collectively. We run sprints together on a regular basis. We'll be planning our Christmas lunch in a couple of months. And we tread the same carpet. There's a big room of them right next to me, a blend of lawyers, developers, and data scientists next door. It is a real team. We need this, I believe, because there is no way our firm will stay relevant if we can't keep up with the tech, and we will not understand it well enough. We need the expertise. It's manifestly obvious. So firm is our belief that one of the first things we did is do all legal work, all of the onboarding and risk management work to get GitHub Copilot into the developers, because our team of developers said, we need this in the firm. This is going back a long time now, maybe a year and a half. They said, we need this in the firm. It's going to make us so much more productive. Let's get this going. And so we drove to their agenda for a period of time to get that up and running super quickly. We also created something really unusual in law firm. We have like an internal investment fund. Think of that as a chunk of cash that is like R&D capital. I don't think there's any other law firm that does this, that will pay for the R&D, it will pay for the innovation. It'll also pay the salaries of this diverse mix of skill sets. And the idea is, in my group, we can use that to bring in the right people and get the right projects away with the right skill sets and break down the office barriers, change the working environment, get everyone treading the same carpet in the way I described. We also repurpose that diverse skill set into the advisory practice, because obviously we advise a lot of clients on AI, one of the leading law firms in the world on that. And so we're bringing in some data science expertise into the legal advisory. Our client businesses are deploying AI in completely different use cases. So it is working very well. Long may my rivals fail to do this, because they're missing a trick.
I have another question about acquiring skills. Traditionally, in law firms, the new graduates, the new joiners, did fairly tedious and repetitive bits of work, and in the way, they learned how to do the harder stuff. Now, if AI is doing a lot of that work nowadays, how are people going to learn the system and be able to progress up the ladder if there's no starting point? Or is that just a misconception?
It's somewhere in between. No one goes to law school to do process and routine tasks. Whatever skills they developed at law school was around strategic thinking and decision making. We're seeing AI is augmenting that characteristic. So yes, we are definitely going to be removing process over the years, 100%. I think that's what the core training of lawyers became over the last couple of decades. I don't think that's where the core training lawyers was 50 years ago, to be honest. I think it was much more about critical thinking and that strategic approach to legal services. So what we are imagining and believe in is that our lawyers will always be the expert in the loop, but they'll always be the person making the final judgment call, but they will be focusing on that skill of critical thinking, and they will be removing process through technology, including Gen AI. And we're so sure of it that we've changed our recruitment program. When we hire grads today, we've introduced in our interview process questions around what prompts would you write for this legal question. That's the first thing we test, and like prompt engineering, aptitude for using this tech. And then we ask them how they would validate the output, how they would check the answer is complete with a conclusion as to whether or not AI is worth using. Those are going to be really important skill sets going forward. So I think they're going to get the experience they need, maybe quicker, because they're focusing on more complex and substantive work early in their careers because they're using this technology.
One of the implications of moving to using these systems is that you have to shift both your clients and your colleagues away from the idea of charging for billable hours towards the idea of charging for the value added by AI systems, which work very quickly. They don't take hours and hours to do the job. And that's a different way of billing. It's a different way of doing business. It's a different business model to an extent. How is that going? Are you finding clients very amenable to that, or some of them are a bit stuck in the old ways?
This is really a question about the billable hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say AI adoption is going to have a big impact on the business model of law firms. It's a bit early to say exactly how. I'm going to guess that the billable hour is going to be here to stay to some degree. There'll always be some very bespoke work where neither the lawyer nor the client can find an AI system that will do it straight out the bat. And it's even hard to quantify the work involved, actually. It's dynamic and it's difficult to predict. So that is always going to be there, very, very top end strategic. However, there is going to be a shift. And we're already seeing it in a couple of areas. One is A&O Shearman is now licensing a software as a service AI system in Contract Matrix. That's a license fee model. So that's a new charging model. Packaging legal expertise in the AI system, and the clients are licensing it directly in a conventional way for the software industry. And that's where we were seeing those savings you referred to earlier. And the other one is the fixed fee will grow. As routine tasks such as contract review, as they can be done more quickly, law firms won't be able to charge that in a billable hour rate. They'll have to move to a value-based billing model. So I think in certain areas, we'll see a replacement of the billable hour with a fixed fee, which is value-based.
Yeah. You must already be seeing this quite a lot. In a former life, I worked on quite a lot of M&A, and there was always a deal room with vast amounts of papers. I always felt very sorry for the accountants and the lawyers.
Yeah.
Who had to plow through these huge amounts of documents, and they spent days and days and days locked away in these rooms. And now this predates the arrival of large language models. It's a deep learning thing as well, that AIs can scan huge amounts of documents and find the relevant information in minutes rather than days or weeks.
Yes.
And that must mean a big change in the business model for you guys.
I think you're right. That will happen. There will be different ways of interrogating data rooms. Virtual data rooms will be completely dominant. They already are, really. I would see the skill set of the lawyers in that environment as being the architects for the AI system that interrogates that data room. So they're asking the right questions that are meaningful to the client for that particular deal and their industry sector. And then they're floating the results of due diligence in a coherent way to the decision makers at the client. So it should not only change the business model, but I think because it's very data enriched, the advice, I think it will be better quality. From the client perspective, it will feel more like a data driven report as to what the virtual data room says rather than a legal treatise on the company. And that's a good thing. That's an improvement of the service to clients. We're very interested in that side and obviously investing a lot of time, energy, and money in making that happen.
So this is the London Futurists podcast, so I'm going to ask you to put on your futurist hat and look a little bit into the future. And you've talked about what's happening now and the transformations that are taking place, and it is indeed exciting. But can you anticipate what may happen in the next 5 or 10 years? Will there be huge scandals and mistakes and lazy lawyers who inadvertently cause the whole field to be set back? Or do you see a world in which law moves smoothly into the background? And whenever I'm typing, there's a thing checking that what I'm typing is legally sensible. And whenever I click on one of these very long online contracts, the system has already told me this is good or you shouldn't sign it.
I think there will be good actors and bad actors like there is on any technological deployment, and there's no reason legal industry won't be the same. So there probably will be some bad deployments of AI in the legal sector. The people who don't do the governance, don't do the work, roll out systems casually, don't manage the hallucination risk either through training or curation of data sets to support the AI model or whatever it is, whatever the techniques are. However, I also think this technology will dramatically change the legal sector. We have prototypes which kind of do what you just said. We've got an analyze function in our contract matrix system that has a pre-engineered playbook which will apply a red, amber, green status to NDAs, loan agreements, and a few other types of agreement and say, these are really bad provisions, these are the okay provisions, but maybe you could improve, and these are the great provisions for you. A nice, simple, color-coded scheme. We finish with the lawyer then taking it the last mile. So the lawyer will check that review, make sure it's correct, and then finalize an advice. But that is a step in that direction. Why not? It will change access to the legal market and access to justice. Suddenly, law firms maybe will be selling systems that are infused with that knowledge and that expertise rather than the human packaging it only, which is a state today. So, yeah, I think it will be that. And it'll be really exciting to see it. And the generation coming up are going to have a brilliant career if they're open minded. It's going to be a really fun time to be a lawyer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, my final question is about Strawberry. Because you're very keen to remain ahead of the pack. Have you experimented much yet with OpenAI's recently launched GPT-4o1, which is nicknamed Strawberry, and has more advanced reasoning capabilities than its predecessors? So it can break down a complex project into a series of steps and work out the best way to approach each of those steps without much human supervision. Have you been experimenting with that?
Yeah, a little bit. It's so new, we haven't got a mass deployment plan. I think it is impressive. I think this is very impressive, actually. That combined with agentic is going to be fabulous. We've seen the release from Microsoft as well in tandem, looking at devising your own agents within Microsoft Copilot, combining it with the reasoning, with Strawberry. I knew the technology was not going to stay the same. It was only going to get better. It's going to be no worse than when we started in 22. We are really excited about the next 6 months. The change is coming quicker than I thought it would, actually. So, yes, we'll be exploring those things.
I said that was my last question. I'm going to cheat because you raised this word agentic. That's bandied around a lot and it seems to mean different things to different people. What do you mean by the word agentic in terms of AI?
Actually, you're right. It does mean different things to different people. When I'm talking to someone about agentic AI, I think two things. I think either one where a decision is made and an action is taken, so it's like straight through delivering an action point. But I've also seen it used as a term where you can create a series of AI mini questions packaged as a single new HR chatbot. It's just a combination of decision making, Strawberry style, into a new kind of platform, a new hub of them. They're used interchangeably. I agree with you. I see both of them as pretty interesting, actually. So we'll be starting projects on HR, AI advisory services, on what are the firm's policies, not CV reviews or anything like that, but what are the firm's policies on X, Y, and Z. In marketing, we'll be doing a slightly different thing, maybe, and finance, possibly. Well, it'll be closer to true agentic AI because it'll be generating and submitting things with less human review where it's not a risky area of the business, if that makes sense.
Let me slip in then a question about human review. You've said several times that your systems produce some recommendations and then a human lawyer will evaluate them.
Yeah.
Roughly how many times does the human need to intervene and say, oh no, this wasn't quite right? And in such cases, is there a way that you can therefore tweak the model? Not just that it gets this one answer right if it's asked again, but it becomes more intelligent, more humanly knowledgeable generally.
The lawyers using the AI to cure writer's block, I suppose, like to get a first draft, just get you quickly going and spinning out the first draft of a contract, whatever it is. However, to have it inch perfect, that is rare. I think the lawyers are taking it last mile almost all the time. They're just saving a chunk of time at the beginning to get the work product out the door. In terms of training, so taking that data, taking how the lawyers improved it, and then looking at the model, thinking about how it can be improved, that isn't the cheapest thing to do in the world. For us, it is an ROI question. Is it worth it? Because the legal practice is quite niche, you'll have, let's pretend, the French nuclear energy specialist. That's all they do. Maybe it's a team of 5 people operating out of Paris, our Paris office, let's pretend. I'm not sure we'll want to constantly fine-tune a model just for that team of 5. So for me, it's about ROI, but that is clearly going to be an important thing in some really big industry sectors.
So that's a nice mix of pragmatic understanding and also a vision for how things can improve.
Yes.
We're really grateful for the insights you've shared, insights relevant to the law firm, but insights, in fact, relevant to many other industries too. I think our audience will be very grateful to listen to this.
It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for coming on, David. Nice to meet you.